where history's shadows cast long, unsettling doubts, the truth lies buried. From cryptic wartime codes to assassinations that scarred generations, unearth the secrets the world tried to forget. Hosts Tim Gardner and Eli Frame guide you through a labyrinth of unanswered questions, where every clue pulses with danger and intrigue, and perhaps an opinion or two. It's not all facts because history never is. Welcome to the Ciphered Past.
Welcome, everybody, to a new Ciphered Past. It's episode 32. I'm Tim Gardner, along with Eli Frame. Eli, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much. I hope your week is treating you pretty well. I heard the East Coast out there, other than you, is probably getting hit pretty hard with some snow.
Yeah, I think it's a mess. It's like, got down in the 30s here. So, I had to put my jacket on and stuff.
And Florida, wow, that's crazy. We're up here in the 40s in the Northwest. So, well, it's good to see you, man. Thank you again. And that Lisa P's episode was incredible. I'm excited for everybody to watch it and to really dig into what she had to say. So, yeah. So, well, tonight we have our roundtable episode. We usually do this every month, and we welcome back our friend of the show and our colleague, Dan Hanke. Dan, thank you so much for coming back in and joining us for episode 32.
Well, thanks for having me. A lot of news coming out this year about JFK and the files.
Yeah.
If you can avoid Epstein stuff.
Yeah. And the Epstein thing is a whole, Pandora's box. So we won't really get into that all tonight. But so to start the show off, I mean, we last episode with Tim that we talked about the Harvey files. I talked to Chad Nagel, and he said that the CIA said that they're not going to release those particular files. In your opinion, are you disappointed, or are you just pretty much neutral to the whole thing because it is what it is?
I'm very disappointed. I mean, we have a president who says, we're going to release everything. So in my mind, that means every single file from all of the agencies that were, approached by the ARRB need to release everything. And that does include William Harvey's travel records and his personnel file. And even if you had the view that the elements of the agency or the entire agency are innocent, well, that makes it work. I mean, why are you holding this back? The law said that the files have to come out. And it looks like Congress isn't going to push for it then. And that's, to me, that's really criminal, that they're going to sit back and take it.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're 62 years in and you've admitted to these records existing. He's clearly involved in the milieu of folks who are assassination related, whether he was involved or not. And so we know the records exist, and you've now gone back and said you're not going to release them. So to me, the presumption is then they show guilt in some form, right? I mean, what could possibly have national security implications at this time, or what would be else embarrassing outside of the assassination, box? That he was going to meet with Claire Booth Luce for whatever reason. Nobody cares about that. Okay, you can tell, we would talk about it, but to me, it shows that there's something there, right? It's kind of an implicit admission that, we don't want this to get out.
Yeah, and I think it's a common theme with like all the major aspects of the CIA, or the topics or objects that are involved with the CIA, which whether it be David Atlee Phillips, or Angleton or Dulles, or um, any of these guys. I mean, like we're not able to see much on them at all. I mean, unless you have like an author like David Talbot write a book like The Devil's Chessboard. The thing for me, why I think it's so frustrating is that you shouldn't publicly proclaim to people in a community that files are going to be coming out from the William Harvey archive. And unfortunately, I mean, now we're not going to see them. And I think, to me, you know, whether it's like either gaslighting or whatever it is, I think it's not a good look on either the A task force or the CIA that's trying to release this. I mean, like, I think it's just, don't, if you're the task force, do not make a mention of that you're going to release a certain particular thing, or like what the CIA is going to give you, if you know that they're going to say no. Okay. And to me, I think it's just an absolute fallacy that what we're seeing right now is like, we're not going to get that. But yet we have files on Herminio Diaz, and we have files on Jojo Anides, and certain things that really aren't going to connect things together. I mean, I get they're important, but to me, we need to see more, and we deserve to see more, because like Dan said, we deserve full transparency.
Well, I think that, I mean, on some level, I have to say that, like, I feel like no is not an acceptable answer from that agency. You've got senators in the 1970s who were Richard Schweiker and Gary Hart, who were very much concerned with their potential involvement in this murder. And, as Andrew Eiler and others have gone over, there's no provision in the act that allows them to do this. And it is a federal law, and Congress needs to put their foot down. And if they can't or won't, then it's going to have to be public pressure. And I don't know how we get the public to be animated on this.
And it's going to be really hard, because right now everybody's so focused on the Epstein files. Eli and I talked about last episode with Tim that it was 62 years ago, and people look at it like it was 62 years ago, like it was ancient history. And it's unfortunate, because again, I hate to sound like a broken record every episode. And this is the problem, that where we are today, this dark cloud that we live underneath, that was the major root that where we are today. And if people don't question that, it's a really sad thing. And I keep trying to champion the fact that we need to keep pushing it and keep pushing it. But the fact is that, if there's only select few that really are pushing this whole thing, nobody's going to really care.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of wonder, like, boy, do I wish Richard Belzer was alive to hear some of the things that we talked about today, or George Carlin, or Bill Hicks. Those are three voices that could have amplified the story, that are, unfortunately no longer with us, but like had a reach to significant groups of people beyond what historians can do. So absent that, we'll get the report in March, end of March. I'm really nervous about what it's going to say. I mean, I know that Luna said that she believes there's two or more shooters, but I'm really nervous that, it's going to come out and it probably won't make the evening news, or maybe the New York Times will put it on page 35 in 1-point font. Okay, this was released today. Nothing there.
Yeah. No, you're right. And what we really lack now, and have for a while, is the cultural standard bearer, right? That you had in a Carlin or Mort Saul, or these folks who previously had a voice, to reach the public, because I don't think anybody really cares outside of this community, and because they don't understand why they should care, right? I mean, the days of MLK getting hundreds of thousands of people to show up in Washington, right? Those days are gone. There's some new way to do that online, but we need somebody to tap into it, right? You need somebody to really care who's a big voice, and it's not Tucker Carlson or somebody. You need a cultural or somebody who's right outside of the news.
But who is the big voice that's out there? I mean, that's my big question. I mean, like, we don't have anybody that's really, I mean, with all due respect, and I have a lot of respect for this man, but Jefferson Morley is not the guy that I would look at and go, wow, this guy is going to actually really help bring things together. Look, I know I'm going to get a lot of criticism when it comes to this, but look, I like Jeff Morley. I think he's a really good researcher. I think he's a great researcher, and I appreciate what he's done. But I think at the end of the day, when it comes to, like, I don't think he's dragging his feet, but I don't think that he's actually getting the direct results that we should be looking for either, right? And I think it's a major problem. And if it's only him that's really out there with his group that's trying to get more information, I mean, that's not a whole lot of resistance. I mean, like, if you have like a Jim DiEugenio and Oliver Stone, right, that were there at that first meeting that said we need to reopen this case, that's really good firepower, right? I just wish, in my opinion, right, I want your guys' thoughts on this. I wish that they would have worked in more of a conglomerate together, as opposed to having one guy and his group of people work on this whole thing versus like the whole group break away from each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, and I like Jefferson Morley too. I've got a couple of his books. I just think you're right. Yeah, James DiEugenio, Oliver Stone, Dan Hardway, and Ed Lopez. Call in some people that worked also on the HSCA and anyone in the ARRB that's willing to help and form a task force to assist Luna, because I don't think she's steeped in the information, and so she needs some help to get through, like, what are the important points, what are the right paths to follow. And I think it would have the end result would be a stronger report. And again, it's not out, so I'm just speculating. I'm just kind of nervous as to what it will say, but yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, I think I mean, again, I'm not trying to take a shot at what's been going on, but again, like, with such an important case that's gone on after 62 years, you would think that you would try to do what the church committee did, or like the House committee assassinations did. Forgive me for mispronouncing that, but like really try to really get to the core of what was going on, and not the outliers and everything that's going on the outside of it. And I feel like, it's important that they have these files that are going on there. But I mean, like, you need to put pressure on these, like, the CIA and different things of that nature, because you do have a lot of autonomy from, Luna and everybody else. I mean, you should be able to do, this is my opinion. I mean, I think that you should be able to do a little bit more groundwork than what you've done. But I mean, again, this does not represent Eli or Dan at all. It's just my opinion.
Yeah, and it's right. So we've talked about this before, but they're cramming 6 or 10 different issues into one year commission, from the assassinations to aliens to I don't know what else. But I mean, it's not serious, so we can't. They have released a lot of files, and that's great compared to prior years. But they're not going to solve anything, and they're not an ARB or an HSCA. We do need a new independent investigation. I agree, but we also need, folks within the cultural environment, meaning the public, right? Within the public to get the word out there, because I don't think any of this stuff will really get pushed through unless you have some sort of groundswell of people who are calling for it. Seen Epstein already over the last, I don't know, year or so, kind of get swept under the rug. Some stuff comes out, people start to get ticked about it, and the masses or the people online start to come out, and then some things start to come out. Whether it all comes out, I seriously doubt. But I think that's probably a result of people getting upset enough that they're not letting Trump say, "Oh, it's a big hoax. We're going to not release anything," right? Eventually, you get the groundswell going, and the question is how to get that for the assassination. It, you almost need like a Joe Rogan to take this as like a passion project, right? That's the only person that comes to mind to me as to who would be have the audience and the reach and not be that political.
And I believe he could be that guy, right? I mean, but the problem is, again, we have so many in this community that, go on the message boards and go on Twitter and go, and they make their opinion known. But when it comes to like the fact that like if they want to put that opinion out there, like in the public and help influence that opinion that's so strong, they back away. I mean, they're keyboard warriors. I mean, like I'm sorry to say this. I mean, like I hate to say this because you have a lot of people that sit there and critique our podcast or like Matt's podcast or like somebody else's podcast because they think that somebody else could do better. Okay, well, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing out there that's going to make an impact on anything? You're sitting there critiquing all of us who are trying to put our voice out there about this. You're not doing anything, but you're sitting there critiquing all of us about this. What are you doing to put yourself out there? You're not doing anything about that, and that is a lot of the people in this community. They're in my opinion, they are like hibernating. They're hibernating behind the scenes with all this information that they know, but they're not willing to actually, work together with people. And that's a problem that I have with this. It's like everybody's like a hoarder. Okay. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I think everybody really needs to work together in order to come to a common theme. And then also, if we want to make this trend, we all have to work together. Everybody's so worried about the stupid red herrings and LBJ and James Files and all the shit that we always talk about. That's not the proper way to.
I completely agree. Yeah, and I agree. There are some elements in the field that hoard, or people that hoard information or hoard certain documents. My thing is when you get out of that into the mainstream public, a lot of people are just comfortable outsourcing their critical thinking. So whatever podcaster or whatever Substacker or whatever uh, director that's got political movies, or musicians that get somewhat political, they just outsource. Okay, this is what I believe because so and so said it, and they don't go and read the documents. And it it leads to kind of a collective. I don't want to say hibernation. It's like everyone's in a torpor or something. They're just kind of sleepwalking through, um, and it's going to take, I think it's going to take something as huge as the movie JFK, because when JFK came out, it wasn't just Oliver Stone was on top of the world because he had Platoon and Wall Street and Born on the 4th of July and 3 Oscars behind his name. At the same time that happened, or McNeil from the McNeil Lehrer Hour on PBS, he came out and said, "Hey, look, I got questions on this murder too." And then the guy from I think Chicago Sun-Times also came out, and forgive me, I forgot his name, but the 2 movie reviewers from Chicago, the one guy came out, he's like, "Look, if you don't have questions about the JFK assassination, then you're not thinking." And so that's 3 big name people. Roger Ebert. That's 3 big name people. Boom, boom, boom. But it takes the first one. It takes Oliver Stone. It takes somebody at that level to come out and say something that's controversial. And but I believe, like, in coming out and saying, "Look, this is what I believe happened here, and here's why," and then hopefully other people at that level follow suit. Maybe Dave Chappelle can be that guy on the comedy circuit and get other people to, start talking about it too. I don't know, but yeah, that's
Yeah, the universe really is small of people that seem to have the cojones to do something like that. I mean, even back then, right? You're talking about a couple of guys or Dorothy Kilgallen, women that were actually asking questions. And I mean, they're a fraction of 1% of the people, right? So you got a small group of people that's going to be willing to do that. And even now, right? People aren't going to, everybody goes along with the same, at least in the media, in Hollywood and everywhere else kind of goes along with the same talking points. So you really got to have somebody with courage to stand up and, risk it. And you're right. I think Chappelle is another one that has shown that he doesn't seem to be, tied down by those same concerns that other people do. And I think Rogan has shown it in the past as well. So,
Well, if they both do it, that would be big. That would be a huge needle pushing event.
Well, I mean, again, I think organic growth on like social media, I think really does help too, because you get a certain, I mean, like, look, I mean, I read a lot of like bullshit, like theories online all the time when it comes to like X or Facebook. God. And Eli, you're right. I mean, why in the world do I still have a Facebook? I have no idea. But I mean, like, my thought process is, I mean, like with the AI coming out with a lot of these things when it comes to like, reality versus art, you have that issue there. But I think for me, it's going to take an army of people, but it takes people in the community to get off their ignorant asses in order to actually really keep pushing it out there about like what doesn't add up and what doesn't add up and what doesn't add up. I mean, for the past year, I've been putting these videos out by Palomara and all these respected people on YouTube that have these great videos that about this case that just doesn't add up. And I just hope to catch one person who doesn't know much about the case that can look into it and go, wow, I mean, that doesn't add up at all. And Dan was right. I mean, like, I think people are so worried about their everyday lives. They don't really want to pay attention to something that is going to take you down through a rabbit hole. And so I think the thing is that for us that really care, even the people that are out there that know it all, their job is to really give that information to everybody else. I mean, you have to. You can't conceal it. You have to share it with everybody. You have to. What good is that if you just sit there and go, well, I know about this and I know about that and I know about this and I have all this information, but you know what? You're wrong because you have a different theory. It makes you look like an idiot. I mean, for sure. So
no, and you just hit the nail on the head, I think, because I think one of our jobs is people who go down this rabbit hole is to step back out of it and find ways to explain certain things at a level that the average person who's not going into this can understand and think, and present it truthfully, but in such a way that they're going to say, well, wow, I didn't know that. And that's troubling, right? For example, Northwoods. Nobody else knows what Operation Northwoods is outside of the JFK or Cold War community. But if the average person read it, they might think, what the heck? Like, this is real and this is a thing, right? And there are a lot of things like that where we don't have to go down and say, oh, was there a red Ford Falcon at the El Chico restaurant that this guy saw? And, he had a license plate that tied to Collins radio. And, that's only fun for us. But if we can step out and take those 10, 20, 50 items and say, look, do these things make sense to you? Or, do they trouble you? If so, like, we don't have answers to them yet, right? And we won't have answers for a specific reason, and that's that the government has withheld all the documentation. So if we can get people to, like Oliver Stone did, but on a much smaller level, make it digestible to the average person, in small bites, and build that up to reach a tipping point that they say, okay, I've read like 5 or 10, 20 of these things now, and this is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's really important. What you just said is to try and make it digestible to the, when I first started reading the books, there were so many names I couldn't keep track of them all. I'm like, who is this? I didn't even have time. Like, it's like I have to go back to college to like draw up a chart of who are these names and who do they connect to. So I think that's a great point. And I think one of the big fish that somebody can do this with is Bill Harvey. Why is it so important that he's traveling with FAA credentials in 1963? Well, first of all, why is he in Italy? And, who is he? Well, he's the head of, he worked for the FBI, yes. And at the FBI. All the connections that were in that Chicago office are very important. Um, but was the head of the CIA assassination team, so that makes him a very important individual. So what is he doing in 1962 and 1963? How would we explain? How would we or any of us explain that to a layperson who's just like, what happened to Kennedy? That would be one name I would pull out. Well, here's William Harvey, and here's what here he is, operating at the complete opposite of JFK's foreign policy with Cuba in 1962, actively sending people in to shoot at Cuban soldiers or Russian soldiers to try and foment a greater war, while JFK is trying to prevent a war. Um, you know, I think if we could have like almost like a Cliff Notes explaining just 4 or 5 people, maybe 6, and why they're important.
Exactly. That's a great point. And I think, if you can distill that down to a short article or a couple of posts on X, which is hard to do, right? But yeah, why is he in Rome? Well, because Bobby Kennedy wanted to fire him, and they sent him over there. And it's interesting that he, what's in Rome, all the Gladio stuff is tied in there. But again, that's a rabbit hole. You really want to get the tinfoil hat people out. We don't want to go down that, but you don't have to have much, right? There's an assassination program. Yeah, we found out about that. He's ahead of it. Oh, he's trying to blow us into a war during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So he gets sent over there. And so why does he come back? And why won't they tell us why he came back? He came back to visit his family. He doesn't need to have, secret credentials.
Exactly.
Or if he came back to go to Langley, he doesn't need secret credentials. Anything.
Right. And why is he going to see Claire Booth Luce, who, let's put 2 and 2 together. He meets with her. We don't know what they talked about literally because none of us were there and it wasn't recorded, obviously. But look what Time Life does after the assassination. I mean, it would be crazy to not think there's a connection between this meeting or series of meetings and Time Life saying, hey, look, here's Lee with the gun. Come on.
Right. And her connections to the DRE and everybody else. So, I think the idea of a Cliff Notes or I've often thought about a website for like takes it up much higher, higher level than like Kennedy's and King or a JFK Facts for, almost for dummies, like you said, or, 101, but
like a good JFK Golden Book, but for adults.
Yes, exactly. Like the ones I read to my kids.
All right, so we talked to Lisa P's last episode, and one of the most incredible points that she made was the paraffin test about his cheek, right? About how, like, if he had fired 3 shots outside the book depository, how much paraffin would be on his face, and they found no paraffin on his face, and she said that alone exonerates him. And I agree with that 100%. And what I find is really odd is that they were able to only retrieve a palm print on the rifle, which allegedly they were able to get from the morgue. I don't know that story too much, but I do know that's crazy. If you were able to, and one question I really wish I would have asked her was, if he fired 1, how much paraffin would be on his face, and like how much would that layer up like after 3 shots? And to me, I think she's absolutely right. I mean, like, if he had fired the 3 shots, he would have had a shitload of like paraffin on his face, and they found none. So what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Well, I think she's absolutely right. And the fact that the FBI and the initial testing found nothing, I think that says everything, because they were the experts at this. They were the experts of conducting these kinds of tests and figuring out the residue from rifle shots and what that means. For them to take a swing and they find nothing, that tells me everything. I mean, because then where is the palm print found? Like the Dallas PD found it later after it's gone through multiple people's hands. I mean, I just find that unfathomable.
Yeah. No, sorry. I was just going to say, I think the DPD didn't find any prints. They sent it to FBI. They didn't find anything, I believe, and then went back to the DPD, and then they found this latent palm print right after he was killed, after Oswald was killed, which like the searches we talked to Bart about when they've searched Oswald a number of times in the DPD, and search number 2 or 3, they find 5 revolver bullets in his pocket. Right? Okay, who's the jabroni that's frisking him the first couple times that doesn't find the 5 bullets? So it's showing up later. It's very odd. And the only thing I'll mention on the paraffin test is some of the books I've read say that doing a nitrate paraffin test on the face was not something they normally did. Now that could be just something that the DPD said. I believe it was coming from those officers that they normally did it on the hands and hadn't done it on the face before, but that it didn't produce anything. They thought it was odd, but they said they did it. I don't remember why they said they did it. I think they were ordered to do it because he allegedly fired a rifle. But the condition that rifle was in, and the fact that Lisa was telling us that when the FBI did it, they would fire the rifle, hand it to somebody else who would clean it. They would hand it back. They would fire the rifle again, Oswald's rifle, that being. I mean, this is not a apples to apples test, right?
Mm-hmm. No, it wasn't. And the fact that they were only they claimed the Mauser was recovered possibly before the Carcano, and every news outlet was able to say that it was a Mauser. I mean, Vince did a brilliant job by saying that all the outlets were talking about, and later on you get people from the lone nut community that always talk about well, it was just a mistake. How can you make a mistake literally on the most important case of the 20th century? You wouldn't be able to do that. You wouldn't be able to do that one bit. I mean, keep in mind, okay, so let's talk about the fact that how maybe Charlie Kirk was killed. He was killed by a sniper rifle. I have no idea. I don't know that crazy story. But what I do know is that there was a lot of people that watched that. I mean, think about this. So the fact that they were able to have signed affidavits and different signed things talking about this was a Mauser, and then they changed it the day after, or even the day that Oswald got killed. I mean, that just goes to tell you how ridiculous this whole thing is.
Yeah, I'm with you. I 100% think that there was a Mauser there. Between the Weitzman affidavit, and Weitzman's, we know he knew this information. He knew rifles. Roger Craig, and I keep thinking about it ever since we talked to Tim Fattig, or you talked to him the first time. I don't think I wasn't on there, but he said he talked to Lieutenant Day. I didn't realize that Tim had talked to so many of these folks in person. He talked to Lieutenant Day, said he could not figure out this Mauser thing, and Day told him, "I can't solve the issue for you. I don't know what to tell you. I found it. I found a Mauser. It said Mauser on it. I can't resolve your issue for you. That why was there a Mauser? Why did it become a Carcano?" He didn't say that, but that was what he was referring to in that. I saw it. It was a Mauser. I'm not mistaken. Sorry, I can't help you fix your problem that you have in your cognitive dissonance between those two issues. And to me, if he still says it's a Mauser, right? And he was also the firearms expert, right, at DPD. So you've got the sheriff's office, the DPD, both identifying it as a Mauser.
Yeah, and that's where I think things backfired for the Dallas Police Department. I mean, I've been heavily critical on them, especially when it comes to their interrogation of Buell Wesley Frazier. And I'm sure our audience gets tired of me keep bringing his name up, but I mean, his name is important. And why we have to really pay attention to those early news releases about this case, because that will tell you right there that was 100% a conspiracy to, 100%. I mean, back then, again, we're blessed with the technology that we have right now to kind of see everything that we see on YouTube, right? But like back then, they wouldn't know the difference. I guarantee you, if my grandfather or my grandmother were able to watch the news, they'd be like, "Oh, they just mixed it up about the Mauser and the Carcano. It's okay. They know what they're doing." But I mean, like us grown adults today with technology and everything, like we can see that's a lot of bullshit.
Yeah, we wouldn't. I mean, like Eli said, you've got three different police officers, sheriffs, and DPDs, right? Roger Craig, Day, and Seymour Weitzman, who actually owned a gun store at one point. So there's no chance he doesn't know anything about guns. He knows everything about. He probably could. Somebody who owns a gun store could probably tell you what the different guns sound like, and if they're firing in a different room, could probably name the type of gun that's being fired. I mean, for them to look at the that's actually a number 3 pencil, not a number 2.
Yeah, and you got to think, I can't speak for each of these guys' backgrounds, and other than the sporting goods store and the gun store, but they're growing up in Texas in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. Some of them would have been World War II vets. Some of them would have been in the Korean War. These are not the same, we would say, coddled folks that we have now, right? This is a different environment back then. I don't think they would have that much of a distance from firearms, and maybe it's be the same way in Dallas today. I don't know, but these guys were used to handling firearms. They'd grown up with firearms. It was probably part of their life if they grew up in rural Texas or anywhere else, right down there. It's like, it's not the same thing as pulling a kid off the streets in Portland and saying, "Is this a Mauser or Carcano?" Right?
Yeah, I agree, man. I mean, like it'd probably be a gat, though. I mean, like, sorry, no pun intended up here, but yeah, we'd have.
You could tell if it was a Glock, but
yeah. I mean, but anyways, all jokes aside, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, then you had that, and then also you had, early outlets talking about like there was a possibility he was shot from the front, um, and several like sources that talked about that in different news outlets, and then of course, Eli, our last episode with, I think it was Tim, we talked about like how over the radio, they talked about a 30-year-old white man with black wavy hair. That didn't match the description of Lee Harvey Oswald over the radio thing. So, I mean, again, we have to really do pay attention to the early reports that they had on there, and that's where I think that we have a lot of information that's out there that can really help us, like guide us through this whole thing, to know this whole thing is bullshit.
That's a really important point to make, because and Lisa P says this a lot about, especially about the RFK information. The earliest reports are the ones usually that are closest to accurate before the story gets guided to what the official's narrative is going to be. Because I think there was that night or that day in the afternoon, there were outlets that were saying 6 to 8 shots. Now they're probably taking that from eyewitnesses, ear witnesses. I heard 5 shots. I heard 6. So it was on the radio, and I think even some afternoon editions of newspapers printed that 6 to 8 shots. How the story evolves. Obviously, you've got the DRE calling all over the place that night. We knew Oswald, he's a communist, and all this kind of stuff. And by the press conference at night, I think they're already down to 3 bullets, or maybe it's the next morning. But yeah, the early stories. So that's critical.
And Joe McBride in Into the Nightmare talks a lot about that exact same thing. I mean, about and one thing that's great about that book that I really like it for is his personal experience with the assassination. I think he was in high school when it happened, and he was, very close to the situation in that his parents were journalists. He grew up sort of in a, well-informed household, that kind of a thing, right? He had met Kennedy on a campaign stop in 1960, as a kid, but still he goes into deep detail of him leaving school to find out what was going on, and, his personal journey over the course of decades to come from at the very beginning. And he says the same thing as a journalist later he learned, And it kind of went back and he said, yes, exactly. This fits with what I experienced, that when he's listening to the radio and the TV that first day, and he said, he didn't believe that Oswald was guilty because they were talking about shots from the front. They were talking about these different issues. And then he said later on, even him being a critic from the beginning just got weighed down with, the constant drumbeat of Oswald did it. Oswald did it. This is what happened. The august body of the Warren Commission. And even him for a couple of years, he said he just kind of bought it. He was like, I must have been wrong, right? I must have misheard. Maybe I don't remember. Maybe I misremember what I heard on the radio, and then it took some of those first guys like Mark Lane putting out books, and then he would read it and say, okay, wait a second. No, I did experience this. And this is what happened, right? So, that's one thing I really love about that book is his personal experience of going through what probably all of us have experienced in our lives in growing up and learning these things taught to us in a certain way, and then kind of peeking under it and seeing man, that's really ugly. Like, that can't be true, because if that's true, then this and this could be true, right? And backing away from it, and then sort of later maybe going into it deeper and being a little bit more mature. But that was a long-winded way of saying I think that's absolutely right to look at the first initial reactions in the initial news. I recently saw one about 9/11, and it was just a clip of the different news reports, that first day. And it was shocking to see all the different things they were saying on the news compared to what the standard narrative is now. And I'm not here to talk about 9/11. I'm just saying it was very interesting, because things that are completely denied now were being open on the national news.
Oh yeah, there firefighters interviews from that day that do not correspond with what the story is now, and that it's shocking when you hear it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because again, with the Kennedy assassination, there's a lot of things that just don't add up, like, to what the official narrative was. I think the first 24 hours, they were confused. They had no idea what to do. Think about this. Say what you will say about Fletcher Prouty, about like his his account, how everything went on. I get that a lot of people talk about, like, his account in JFK was really fictional, whatever it was. But like Jim DiEugenio said, I believe most of it was, because the fact is that when he was in what was he, Antarctica, or like South Antarctica, or South wherever he was, he was able to see news reports down there about who the assassin was, hours after the assassination, right? The crazy thing is, and you both brought this up brilliantly on this episode earlier, is that, the Luces who run Time Life, they were able to get all this information about Oswald and stuff, like, right after what happened, right? So, the crazy thing for me is, the public was able to see, this communist guy and all this other stuff. They were able to, throw it right into everybody's baskets, and everybody was able to resolve it. Like, oh my God, it was communists killed him. A lone guy, a crazy guy that was able to get back into the United States from Russia. And to all of us who look into this thing, that is massive, like gaslight. It's just nothing but a lie, and it's really bad. I feel bad for Rachel and June, his daughters. I feel horrible, because they're still suffering from the fact that their father, quote unquote, was responsible for the death of a president, 62, 63 years ago, when, if you put the math together, he really wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. What a horrible position to be in. And you can understand why they, shy away from the media and talking about the case at all at this point, and just want to live their lives. That's just a horrific thing. For some reason, you just made me think about, when we're talking about the early stories, one thing that's always surprised me, or bugged me, I guess, both, Abraham Zapruder. Almost everyone else on both the north and south side of the Knoll had their cameras confiscated, and he was the one that didn't get confiscated. They bought it, the Luces. So if you read the book Family of Secrets by Ross Baker, there's some very interesting information about Abraham Zapruder and where he worked and who he was surrounded by. And I'm just going to throw this out there. It's just an opinion. I feel like there's something suspicious about the background there and the way that I'll just say this. If I'm filming a politician, a motor, whatever, and the person gets shot in front of me, I don't think my hands are going to be very steady. I think I'm going to drop the camera and go, holy, and go running. Like, what happened? This is a very unusual situation where the person gets blown up in front of you and you.
I've always wondered about that. I thought he had such a steady hand. Like everybody's diving on the ground, right? Him and the babushka lady are like,
Yeah. But yet he didn't have like a steady hand in the beginning when they were making that turn onto Elm. It was like some weird, like, like whatever the hell, you know what I mean? I mean, it just, like we talked about last episode with Tim. I mean, just the fact that you had all these people down in the basement with like Jack Ruby and stuff is just, I don't know. You're right, man. You nailed it, Eli. You nailed it, man.
no, that's an interesting point. And I've not read that book. I've not thought about Zapruder being anything other than what he said he was. Yeah, it's a great point. There was some, I don't remember where, maybe it was somebody we talked, I think Bart Camp was talking about it, maybe. Regardless, it's one of the issues that he had, I think it was him, with the Zapruder film was the speed at which the car was moving and how they had, maybe perhaps one of the things that was edited was to make the car look like it was traveling along and not stopping, right? Because we know it's slowed down. You can see it in the next film, but you don't really see it in the Zapruder film. And I don't know anything about videos to say that, okay, from where he was standing, you wouldn't have noticed it, right? Perhaps that's true. But he made it clear that it's not that hard to take out certain frames and make it look like a smooth traveling vehicle, that's not slowing down and stopping potentially and then zooming off. You see it zoom off, but the Z film, who knows? It's interesting because it's also, it's the proof positive to us and the most obvious thing to say, okay, yes, there was a conspiracy, right? There was a shot from the front. So it seems to me if he was anything other than what he said he was, why would they do that? Why would they film it and put that out, if he was a permissible photographer, whatever you want to call him?
I'm cynical. I would and tell me what you think after if you get around to reading that book. The cynical part of me says, you know what? They're so proud of what they planned. They wanted to be able to watch it. They wanted to be able to see it themselves later, replayed at parties or whatever, where there's the 5 of them or 6 of them in a room. But that's the ultra cynical side of me.
No. So I can agree with you on that. There's a movie called Parkland, right? With Billy Bob Thornton, Zac Efron, and a bunch of different characters that came out, I think, about 10 years ago, right? And they framed the whole scene about like, how important Abraham Zapruder was, which, I would agree he is, right? But so if you listen to Orville Nix's like account about like what happened with the grassy knoll area where he felt like the shots came from, and then when Mark Lane asked him a question, well, they told me that it came from the book depository. So, but earlier in his account, what he says is that Forrest Sorrells, who was played by Billy Bob Thornton in that movie Parkland, says that there's a shot from the grassy knoll. Like they feel like there's, that something came from the grassy knoll. And so in the movie Parkland, which is interesting, they grab Abraham Zapruder like he's the only person in Dealey Plaza with all their like Secret Service agents. And they get him to a place and they watch the film like hours after it, which, I mean, that makes sense. Maybe it was an audience, but I mean, I get back to a point of this in which I would disagree with Robert Groden, who I have a lot of respect for. I think the film was altered. I mean, if you look at the film, I've talked to countless researchers. I mean, like a lot of researchers. David Joseph is one of them, and who Eli and I highly respect. If you look at the film, look at the back of his head. When the car is going by, you see no penetration at all to the back of his head. You see only from the front where the lap is coming down, right? So with the wound that he allegedly had, you see the back of his head. There's nothing that moves whatsoever. But with all the brain matter and everything that's coming back out on the back, where even with the cop that was hit, what was his name? I can't remember his name. I apologize, but I usually have his name. But anyhow, who was that? Hardest, yes. But anyways, my point is that with anything, and I've talked to Dr. Fitzgerald on a Spaces forum. He says that there would be literally a ripple in the back of the head. If you watch the film itself, I think there is merit to actually the black mark or whatever they call or whatever they talk about in the back of the head. There's nothing back there. It just sustains through the whole frames. So, I mean, that's just my take.
I mean, I agree. I thought at one point Robert Groden said that he thought that there had been some black mat insertion to the back of a head to make it look, like there was no damage back there. But maybe he changed his mind. I don't know. I feel like it's altered because I feel like the difference between Zapruder and Nix, when you look at them, the Nix film is very clear. The car slowed down to a point where the motorcycle guys, damn near drive into the back of the car. I mean, they had to brake pretty hard, it looked like. But you don't see that on the Zapruder film. But maybe because it's zoomed in so close. I don't know. But
well, then the next film. Okay, so the next film is really important. That's why Gail Nix Jackson, which we are trying to get her on our show, by the way. We'd like to talk to her about like exactly what her grandfather, or was it her father or grandfather? Forgive me. Yeah. So what he witnessed, and again, his interview with Mark Lane is super important because he talks about like how, again, he thought the shots came from the knoll, and like when he put his film in there, like, he retrieved, he didn't feel like all of his frames came back the same way that like it was a very honest guy. So if you watch the film, Eli, I'm looking forward to your response on this. You watch the film, basically the car like comes, I mean, you get such a vantage point, and this is why I think that film is so important. You really get to see how slow that the car comes to. I mean, it doesn't come to a stop, but it's like basically just drifting barely, and it's almost as if like, they are ready for it to have that target get hit. I think that film is probably more important than the Zapruder film. I really do.
It's very interesting, and it's very interesting for that reason that you mentioned, or maybe other reasons. But to me, it's in the Zapruder film, like we've talked about. If you watch it, the car's moving smoothly along. You can't tell. It looks like it's moving at a decent clip, right? And in the Nix film, it does slow down drastically, and it doesn't do it as it's turning. I mean, it does it as it's turning, but it does it when it's going down Elm Street after it's had made the turn, ready to accelerate down a hill, slight hill. It doesn't make any sense to me. Why would it slow down to such, everybody described this, that it slowed down / came to a stop. It doesn't make any sense to me. You end up imputing the, guilty action to it, right? Because of what happened. And maybe there's a reason that it happened that's not guilty, but to me, it doesn't make any sense why that would happen. And the Nix film is so important to show that.
yeah. I'd like to hear. Maybe Vince Palomar has spoken about this in his books, and I just haven't had a chance to get to him yet. But you would think that the Secret Service, part of their training is you hear something like that and you just go. I mean, immediately. They did testify that they heard a shot. Kellerman, I heard a shot, and then I heard a volley of shots. Like after the first shot, you would think, whether you think it's a firecracker or not, you're gone.
I think that Palomar somebody has written about that. I believe it's Palomar, that the training is to gas it at any sign of that kind of a thing. Of course, human error. You could have been scared to death for your own life, but to me, they're trained to do this thing, right?
Well, one could argue though that the main driver was, I think he either got fired or he died of a heart attack prior to the Dallas trip. I think it was like maybe a month or so prior. And so they had, not Greer, but who was the driver? Greer was the driver, right? Yeah, yes. Forgive me. So, I always thought earlier when I was doing my research on this whole thing, that he was in shock. I mean, and that would make sense, right? I mean, like you're in a situation, you're a new driver for the president. I mean, like it's a big thing, and there's so many. I mean, it's so fast, right? I always tell people like all the time, this whole thing was so fast. It was like again, for as long as I'm speaking, like it already happened by now, and the car went all the way down to the Stemmons Freeway, and it was gone. And the fact that like he probably was just, I mean, that's what was my early like reaction to it. But then as I keep like getting more information about it, I mean, the fact that like this guy who should be trained should not be able to just be like, turn around and look at what's going on. You have a job to do. If you hear anything, even a firecracker go off, you go, you take off. You don't slow down and look and turn back and look and see what's going on. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, Vince, like you said, like he could really add up a lot of pieces together on this. There's just so many things that don't add up.
Yeah, I mean, what's the explanation for it? I mean, honestly, I mean, I don't know I don't even know if they were asked about it. If William Greer was asked, like, why did you slow down? I think they
I think he got a medal. He got a medal for his bravery, which is ridiculous. I think so. So
Really? I mean, yeah, they wouldn't have asked. They wouldn't have. Hell, Earl Warren probably didn't even know that it happened. He slowed down. It's
yeah. They probably just ignored that whole thing.
I know earlier before we got online, we were talking about Malcolm X, and I think it was in the documentary you recommended, or it might have been in Jim Douglas's book. But in that interview, one of the men who knew Malcolm closely said, "I've heard that there's video of this shooting, and I believe they take video when these type of things happen." And that takes me back to what you said about the Zapruder film and your cynical response. But I thought of that because at the time I thought, they take videos of it, like that's, it's sick. That's sick, right? But there's at least two of you in that camp, and I don't remember. I believe, I don't know. Do you remember it being in the documentary?
I definitely remember them saying that, and
okay,
I also remember them thinking or saying that there might have been as many as a half dozen FBI informants in the building at the time, which to me is just, it's absurd that there's been no federal investigation into this crime. But, particularly, I don't want to spoil it for you, but you'll get to the end of the series. But it's those two murders, I think, mirror each other. I think they're very much connected, John and Malcolm, and I think, at the end of the day, if we ever get to the bottom of the funnel, we're going to find out that some of the same people that took out JFK were involved in Malcolm's death too.
Yeah. We had, like we've mentioned, we had Lisa Pease on yesterday, and we talked a lot about RFK, and it's what Paul Blow, I guess, calls the regime change specialists, the folks who had done this abroad all over the place. And then, like Malcolm said, when the chickens came home to roost, right? There's no reason to think that they would have any qualms about bringing it domestic and doing it in the U.S. if it's all done in the name of national security and anti-communism and, motherhood and apple pie and all that stuff. If they're indoctrinated enough to, into those beliefs, then they absolutely think they're in the right and they're doing the right thing. And I don't doubt that for a second. But yeah, it's a good interview with Lisa too. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing it. Here's a real quick note, addendum to the Malcolm X thing. In 1964, after he leaves the Nation of Islam and forms the Organization of African American Unity. Guess who got a file on Malcolm X over in the office?
James Angleton.
Close. Director of Plans, Richard Helms. Richard Helms gets a file on Malcolm X. We know what the Director of Plans did. That's the offense. So somebody's saying, I mean, let's get real. Like they're saying he's got to go, right? I mean, you want him surveilled, then you give it to some other person, or you lead the FBI to do that. But Richard Helms gets a file. To me, that's scary. I mean, to me, that means that somebody's telling them, here's the person. We have to make sure that they're gone.
That's very interesting. Yeah,
it's just my quick thoughts on after reading that. I couldn't believe it, but
wow.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, like anything with Helms is nuts. I mean, I don't know if you guys both saw the post that I did about a month and a half ago with him being like basically interrogated by some like reporter in the 80s, or I think it was the 90s. And they're asking him questions about like, were you there in Dallas? I mean, what do you have to do in Dallas? And the guy basically he was melting down. I mean, like at his old age, I mean, like he seemed to be frail. And, I'm more convinced that this guy was actually a gatekeeper for a lot of things, whether it is, MK Ultra or different files in that regard. So yeah, he was nuts. But, we could do a show on Malcolm. Like I actually, Dan, I'd love to have you come back and Eli and I do a little bit more research on Malcolm. I'd love to have you come on and talk to us about Malcolm. That'd be great. But I think the thing that really that I am troubled by with this whole case again is the Dallas Police Department, right? And so this is where I'm really I feel like that these guys had, Tim really brought a major revelation to me, when it came to like the Dallas Police Department versus like the Sheriff's Department, right? And how Sheriff Decker and how Buddy Walters and that sector was able to receive more responsibility for what had happened. I think for me, with like everything that's just so weird with like the Croy aspect, the Westbrook aspect, all that stuff. I mean, like what I would say is that, it doesn't surprise me that they worked in a conglomerate, but I do think they were definitely separated. I mean, for sure. I think the Sheriff's Department was definitely working on their own little angle too.
Well, I would. But the sheriffs and DPD, we have Westbrook, right, and maybe 2-3 others. I mean, it can't be everybody. It's got to be, but it's a small compartmentalized group. I just wonder who their connection was to Westbrook outside of the building. Like, who's making the phone call to, I don't know, Ruby has to come in a certain way, and there's. Has that been discovered? Do you know? Have any thoughts on that?
They would never disclose that. But I think the best. I mean, Eli, I'd love to hear your response on this. But I think the best case scenario is that we could theorize what happened. I mean, that's a great question.
Yeah, the only thing that comes to mind for me is the night. I don't know if it was the night of the 22nd or the 23rd. The Jack Ruby in the car for 2 or 3 hours with Kathy Kay and her boyfriend who's on the DPD, right? There's that scene that he testified to, and the Warren Commission interviewed the cop too, who was a DPD, and I can't think of his name right this minute, but he was in the car talking with Jack Ruby for 2 to 3 hours that night. And they said, he said Ruby was going crazy and, he was upset. Ruby said that the cop and Kathy Kay wouldn't let him leave because they kept talking to him. But regardless, that's an odd situation to be in, given what happened, the following day, right? So that could be a point of contact.
The other thing is, too, don't people say, there are a lot of people who used to say over the years that Jack Ruby he didn't plan to kill Lee Harvey Oswald. It's a spur of the moment thing because he loved Jack Kennedy and he loved Jackie Kennedy, and he wouldn't have left his dog in the car for all those hours. Meanwhile, there's film Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. All 3 days he's in the Dallas, especially Saturday. It seems like he's stalking Oswald.
Right.
Okay. So I'm supposed to believe it's not premeditated when he's like practically stalking the guy through the building?
Yeah, well, and then also to mention that he had eye contact with, Captain Fritz when Fritz was walking out before Oswald came out. I think that video is absolutely damning because you look at Fritz walking out, and we talked about this on the Tim Faddick episode. Fritz is walking out, he looks over at him, like he kind of recognizes him, right? And then he walks his own way towards where the booking car or whatever it is, and all of a sudden that bump bump, the horn goes off, and then the shot comes out, right? And then we talked about like how Fritz is like over on the other side of the corner, and he's like looking over like, okay, he's far enough away. I mean, like that was sketchy. And then, again, why was Croy down there of all things? Why was this deputy police officer down there, like right near Jack Ruby during this whole thing when he was just, the first person on the scene with Westbrook on the Tippett murder? I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me either. There's just so many questions.
What's funny is that, and I saw that in the Tim Faddick episode, and that's a great catch on the film because I hadn't noticed that before. But so the guy who's handcuffed to Oswald is James LeVay. Is that his name?
Lavelle, yeah.
If you look at that, I mean, and this may mean nothing at all, but everyone else is wearing dark suits, dark overcoats or something like that. But LeVay's like white jacket, white hat, and like everything. It's almost as if he was somehow cognizant of what was about to happen. They did this in case like Ruby has to know, don't shoot the guy that's in white. Shoot the guy next to him.
Or at least here, it's easy to catch your eye, right? I mean, everybody's going to be seeing the perp walk, but the guy in white's going to stand out. He's like the man in the yellow hat. That's funny. But I think between Westbrook and Croy and Fritz, you've got a pretty good triumvirate there to look at in terms of people who might know. And Tim made a great point in the last episode, or whenever we talked to him, that a lot of these guys would have just been following orders, and they probably wouldn't thought anything of it. Not, hey, march this guy out here because Ruby's going to shoot him, or any of the other things that happened for the prior 48 hours. You got to think a lot of it was Fritz told him to, or somebody told Fritz to do something, and they did it, right? It wasn't. Of course, it was guilty after the fact or guilty at the time, but it wasn't. They probably didn't see it all, right? And weren't part of the whole thing, right? And I think we know that by this point that most of these folks wouldn't have. It probably were part of it, like say whomever, right? Were part of it and served a purpose, but they had no idea what purpose they were serving at the time.
But let me ask you guys this, okay? So if I worked in the up here, it's Multnomah Police Department, right? And I was a captain, right? And all of a sudden, months later, I became a CIA agent in Iran. That would be pretty crazy, right? I mean, the parallels to Captain Westbrook. I mean, he's a what? Yeah, he goes to Vietnam months later, and he's in the CIA.
When he's the personnel officer at the DPD, right?
Yeah, something like yeah.
He's the Dallas version of the DPD version of the HR department.
Yeah.
So he's not even like Jack Revel in the, in special investigations or intelligence subset of the DPD.
Right.
We talked with Lisa about this, the back and forth between the police departments. You see it in the LAPD, in the RFK situation with Manny Pena and others who were in the LAPD. Then they were training with CIA, and then they were back in the LAPD. I don't know what the broader context of that is outside of the assassination. Certainly there would be some reason they were doing that outside. I mean, it wasn't all just planning for some assassination, but there is this osmosis between them, and there's an osmosis between the government and the CIA and journalists and think tanks and academia and everywhere else, that the revolving door, they come in and out, right? Or the influence that comes out, and then it keeps them coming back for their sources. In the case of academia, grants; in the case of the media, sources for news. But they have this flow back and forth. Westbrook is part of that.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder, like, where's the media? I mean, I think we know where the media is, but where's the media with that question you just brought up? Hank Hernandez and Manny Pena, CIA officers responsible for basically interrogating witnesses as if they were suspects. When you see the Sandy, I forget her name, but Serrano, Sandy Serrano, thank you. Yeah, and where's the media to say, well, what's with this? Why we have CIA people come in? LAPD can do this on their own. Why do these guys have to come in from somewhere else who've been trained in interrogation tactics in, like, countries that have civil wars going on or coups? It's fascinating, and it ties to me. It ties to JFK too. How come nobody in the New York Times, LA Times, or some other newspaper question the Washington Post and George Louder Jr.? George, you're coming out pretty strongly against this movie JFK. Now we know, because they didn't read the Warren Commission, but maybe let's just fantasize. You were the last person to sit down with David Ferrie. Can you explain that?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
What was going on there, right? What happened?
Yeah, and then he passed away within a couple hours of you visiting him.
Yeah, did he write the suicide notes when you were there?
Certain.
Was you writing them? Yeah. Did you help him write the suicide notes, since you are a good writer? Did Garrison talk to? I mean, did he depose Loudner? Do you know?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, yeah, he did. I know he sent subpoenas out for a lot of people, including Alan Dulles, and I think Ronald Reagan in California denied some subpoenas for witnesses out in California. Dulles, I can't remember who stepped in for Dulles, if it was a judge or whatnot, but yeah.
What kills me is that Connolly quashed the subpoena for Sergio Arcacha Smith. John Connolly. Like, it doesn't, I don't know. To the layman, it doesn't make any sense. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to reconcile, because Connolly also said that there were multiple shooters, or he implied it, because he said I was hit with different bullet than the president.
Yeah, and he held that till the day he died, right? He didn't buy the Warren Commission.
Yeah, but he did say, though, that I think they did a fine job and they did a lot of research on this. And, I can accept the fact that, their report. But at the end of the day, it was bullshit, because he had to, like, literally play along with it. But I mean, literally, guys, if you wanted to, literally the key to know everything, exhume his body and get that damn bullet out of his thigh. I'm telling you guys, that's all you have to do. But nope, it won't happen. And it's crazy. I mean, that's just one aspect. I mean, again, I don't want to knock on, like, the task force and what they had amazing witnesses on the second hearing, 100%, right? But if you would have got Ruth Paine there and Buell Wesley Frazier, I mean, I know how hard that probably would have been. So again, please forgive me. But I mean, those two people there, I mean, even Felix Rodriguez granted them immunity. I know it's not that easy. I mean, you got to have some of these people that actually were really neck deep into that, back then. And then somebody would say, well, yeah, you don't even know what it takes to get these people on here and all that stuff. Well, yeah, I mean, like, all you have to do is subpoena them. That's all you have to do. Bring them up there, grant them immunity. I mean, Eli, you're an attorney. You know a little bit more about the law than I do. But, I mean, so for our audience that's actually wondering about that, I mean, like, they could have got those people up there, couldn't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought the committee had subpoena power, doesn't it? if they had subpoena power, then yes, they could subpoena them and have them testify on whether they would tell the truth. Ruth Paine had given the same line for the last 60 years, and Felix Rodriguez seems to be pretty good at what he does in terms of telling his story. So whether you get the truth, I don't know, but they could have brought them up, but they didn't seem interested in any. Abe Bolden, I guess, and Dr. Curtis. That's true. So maybe they did, but they didn't seem interested in any witnesses, the controversial witnesses, and I say that in meaning like could have been implicated some way in the assassination, other than the doctor, right, who's innocent and doing his job, and then Bolden, who was away from it.
Or even put like Jenkins on a video call. By the way, I remember his name this time. But I mean, yeah, you put Jenkins on a video call and like talk, let him, you give him full immunity. I mean, like, what do you have to lose before you die? But I guess that's the code, right? Like if you're in the CIA or like an intelligence agency and you take a code, you never crack. I mean, Ruth Paine never did that. Michael Paine never did that. I don't know if Buell Wesley Frazier ever worked for any sort of agency, but he seems to stick with it. Well, he's changed his story a couple of times, so I don't know. But the fact that he comes out and says that Captain Fritz had a pre-typed confession, I would say to anyone, I mean, that's pretty damning. Like, hey boy, here's a pre-typed confession. I mean, be like, what the hell are you doing, man?
Yeah. It is one of the crazy stories.
Yeah.
But in Ruth Paine, I mean, we talked about Sheriff Decker in the sheriff's department, and they're the ones who went out to the Paine house, right? Buddy Walters, and another, and they're the ones who supposedly took the file boxes of Cuban not suspects in the assassination, but I believe they were communist sympathizers, which is an odd thing for a Dallas Irving housewife to keep, in her home, 7 or 8 file boxes. So that's something that I've always wondered about and kind of fell off. We talk about it, but it fell out of the evidentiary memory hole somewhere, and nobody knows where it is or what was actually in there. But I know probably all of your wives keep file boxes of communist sympathizer names.
It's just a hobby.
Yeah, keep track on the local commies. I don't know, but
yeah, I mean, like, she doesn't care about my spending habits, but she does care about the communist side.
She's a red hunter for sure.
Yeah, that's right. And
that's why I love it. But yeah,
that's funny that you say the good point on Ruth Paine, right? She kept the game face all the way to the end, and several of them did. On the flip side, some of them I think would have cracked over time had they lived longer. I mean, David Morales becomes a terrible alcoholic. Angleton becomes a terrible alcoholic. And then in the Talbot book, you get the story about Ellen Dulles in an interview, I think in 1965 or 6. The interviewer's asking him about Vietnam and, the different problems around the world. And Dulles blurts out that little Kennedy, he thought he was a god just out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So you just wonder, like, how much that haunted them. Is that why they become alcoholics? Is it, I don't know.
That's a great story in that book. It's a good point. And you see around those times, they're the ones that are dropping off, right? I mean, Morales, if we're to believe his best friend, which is what we have to base all this on, said that was who he was afraid of, was his own guys at the CIA. That's why he installed the security system at his house. He said he didn't feel great after he came back from Langley or Washington. He'd been drinking with them and he'd felt out of sorts since that. Then he died, within a couple of days of a heart attack.
And I find that funny because he didn't receive medical attention for, I think, up to 14 to 16 hours. I mean, like, that's ridiculous.
Right. That whole thing is very odd. And, is it a situation of somebody that he became a risk to talk, or I don't know. I don't know how that works, of course, but
yeah. Wasn't that after the party that he went to where he allegedly said that, we got that SOB, didn't we, when they were talking about JFK, and then he said he was in LA when they got the little bastard. Is that what he called him?
Yeah, that's what he said to his best friend and to his attorney, I think, is what's in the Fonzie book. I think all those things kind of came, as well as him having his picture taken in that restaurant for maybe a celebration of his birthday or some kind of party. And then he told the reporter his job description. And it even sounds kind of milquetoast to me, but it was enough to get him on a bad list. Not to say that that's why he was killed, but you wouldn't come out and say what he said. And he didn't say I work for the CIA and I'm in the dirty tricks department or anything like that. But it was enough to say, well, you said too much already, right? So, but I agree with you. If these guys would have lived, maybe they would have cracked. And I also wonder, like you, Tim, what keeps them from setting the historical record straight? Even if you were to write things up and say, give it to your lawyer, this isn't coming out till I die, right?
Yeah. Well, I think, we have several cases of people that flip, right? So we had Wynn Scott. Wynn Scott was going to flip. He died mysteriously. Hale Boggs, he died in that plane crash, right? And this guy was a major advocate about getting things reopened, and he was really against the Hale Boggs story. And you both saw that I put a short out about that, right? And I'm really fascinated about that story because Hale Boggs was a guy that, like Russell, he was in the Warren Commission, and this guy was just like, this shit is not adding up whatsoever. This is not adding up whatsoever, but I'll sign the form if I have to, whatever. Let's get this done. And then years later, he's just like, dude, what did I do? What did I do? And then he's doing a full campaign later on in his life, and people say he's on drugs and all this stuff like that, and allegedly. And then he dies in a mysterious plane crash. You get these little tales all over the place, whether it's, I don't know what Roselli, I don't know what any of these other guys around the House Committee assassination. I don't know what their deaths had anything to do with it, but I do know that really prominent figures like a Hale Boggs or a Wynn Scott, them dying mysteriously right away after they were pushing back on the narrative of it. I mean, that tells you a lot.
It does, right? Wynn Scott was writing a book when he in fact, he was 2 days away from sitting down with Richard Helms to explain what he was doing when he died. So, and they took his book, and apparently they gave the book back to his son, and what they gave him was everything he had written up until the year 1947. So everything post 1947, you're not getting this, which is crazy. And then, Hale Boggs was with Richard Russell and John Sherman Cooper. Those were the three that asked to have a a dissent written at the Warren Commission, and I guess Dulles or whoever. Oh yeah, you can have your dissent. We'll have a notary in the room, which was garbage, and that was never published. I don't know if it's part of the released files or not. And then you're right. He had I think he had consternation, obviously, because he wanted to write a dissent, but then it grew and grew afterwards, and he got more vocal about it, and then disappears.
Yeah, I didn't know that the dissent was ever written. Was it written? I know they wanted to include it, and Warren said, no, we all have to be, on the same page.
Yeah, it was written because Richard Russell got pissed off. He asked one of his interns to go down to the archives, I think it was, to look for it, and they said it's not there. It's not. We just couldn't locate it, and he got pissed off, and that's crazy. I mean, that's another thing that Luna should be digging up.
Of course. Well, I mean, there's so many things that they should be digging up right now, but it seems like again, what's sad is that they're juggling things, whether it be the MLK. I mean, it seems like they have a timeline, right? A brief timeline to address the JFK files, the RFK files, MLK files, the UFOs, which again, if you put most of your time in the UFOs, like Tim was talking about it the last episode, Eli, that you're going to get more people to gravitate towards that. Who really gives a shit about these other three things, right?
Yeah, and we see didn't I think I don't follow this stuff that closely, but didn't Trump just talk about UFOs like right as the Epstein stuff was really coming to a full head of steam, and then wait till you see what happens with Obama came out and talked about aliens or something, and then wait till you see what comes out. It's all just bread and circuses, right? It's silly, and I understand like the disclosure committee. Its job was to get the rest of the files out, which they haven't done. It's not to do a whole nother investigation, and so yes, they did take on more than they could handle and didn't go too deep into the JFK or anything else. They don't have the knowledge to do that, but they didn't even get all the files out, right? That's their job, to disclose the files. That's it. The hearings were great. The hearings were very good, so.
Well, I mean, and the first clear sign of that was how serious the Congress people took the whole the whole hearings, right? You had people that mispronounced Oliver Stone's name. You had Jasmine Crockett was like, by the way, yeah, he was killed by a lone gunman. But let me go ahead and talk about how much of a piece of crap Trump is, and then like, I mean, like you're getting off the topic about what we should be talking about. I don't care how much of a piece of crap Trump is. I don't care about I don't care about any of that stuff. I care about what happened to our President Kennedy. Talk about that. Make it serious. Don't even attend the hearing if you're not going to take it seriously.
Yeah, that was the most frustrating part for me. I mean, I felt like the Democrats didn't care about the facts of the case or didn't know about them and just made a show of not knowing about them. And then some of the Republicans asked questions. Some of them were okay questions, and some of them were, they just didn't know enough or something. I don't know. But to me, that was embarrassing. I mean, if Jasmine Crockett going off the way that she did, I mean, my God, I mean, there's so much information out there that proves that this wasn't, one man, three bullets. I mean, how can you be in the Senate or House? I think she's in the House. How can you be in the House and not know this information? I mean, prepare for the meeting. You're here to serve the public. Do the public a service and read the information before you go up and meet the witnesses.
Yeah, or shut up and just sit there. I don't know who Jasmine Crockett is. Is she the one who said is from the Dallas representative? Okay, so yeah, that was so dumb, and I would have said harsher words, but I know we have to put this on YouTube. But I can't even fathom the reason why you would make statements like that. Not that there was a lone gunman, I understand that, but why on a diatribe about Trump or about any other of this crap that they're talking about? This hearing is about the assassination of Kennedy. You've got some esteemed witnesses here, right, to ask questions about. And if you don't really have questions, don't ask them questions. But who are you earning points with by bashing anybody, Trump or whoever? Who cares? Do that on social media or wherever else you guys want to do it. I didn't understand that. And it was just a lack of respect, like you said, for everybody. And, Morley, I think, harps on this a lot as he always makes his political stripes well known. But the Democrats have really just dropped the ball for a long time on pushing this of one of their patron saints, supposedly, right? It's
once a year, maybe.
Yeah, once a year, right? And then the rest of the time, I don't know. I don't see it, but
but this goes like before Trump was elected, right? The second term, he's just like full transparency, right? And he signs this thing off. He like basically brags that he's given the pen to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. about like having full transparency for everything. And, we haven't got everything. We just haven't. We know that. All of us know that. And I mean, that's one thing. But then when you're doing these hearings, take time to really methodically plan to people that are really interested in this thing in Congress, right? Don't come in and say, hey, Roger Stone, welcome to this meeting, when it's Oliver Stone, you dumbass. Don't do that shit. and I've been saying the S word a lot tonight, and I do apologize, but I mean, like I'm very passionate about this. You got to be prepared when you come to these things, because again, how often, I mean, when was the last time we had hearings in the first place? And I think it was 45, 50 years ago when we had meetings.
Yeah, the HSCA, right?
Yeah.
The last. Well, I mean, that would even wasn't. Yeah, that would have been the last time, I guess.
Yeah,
But,
and you've got Don Curtis there. I mean, so that at least treat him with respect. I mean, I mean, what are the chances you're going to get a Warren commissioner up in front of on a podium again? I mean, probably zero. I mean, so yeah, that was really disappointing. I will say I did like Jeff Morley's responses when the people tried to get political to him directly. He's like, basically, I'm not here for that. I'm here for the case.
yeah,
I mean, yeah, it was just frustrating.
That's frustrating, but we know that politicians are clowns, and they're probably all on the same side, anyways. That's my personal opinion, but that's why we need another investigation, right? Because it's not going to come from them. They're fools, and they have no real interest in doing that. So I think you need the pipe dream would be to have, like you said at the beginning, a group of people, and Larry Hancock has talked about this and others, people who know this case very well, and like Larry and Jeff Morley could be there too, and right, we know the guys, Alan Dale and others who could go and even just go to the archives and let them know the things they don't know, right? Because Luna knows to ask what Morley has told her or some other people, but those guys would really know the Hart Schweiker files that have not been released and other things that, okay, these have to come out under the law, and we know they exist, so please find them. That's all they have to do. And if the CIA stonewalls more, then okay, let us know and bring that up, make that an issue. But you need to have folks in there who from a wide area, because this is there's 6 million JFK documents, right? So if Morley's the man when it comes to CI SIG and Angleton and that kind of stuff, great. And bring in some guys who know about the FBI more and other things, military intelligence. So yeah, it's not going to happen.
No. I mean, if it hasn't happened already, especially with the way that it's dissolving right now, like it definitely won't happen, and I think that's really unfortunate. But we can talk about that at our next roundtable next month, and hopefully Robert will be with us on that. But so we're gonna close the show out. You guys know the drill. We're gonna go and give our final takes, and then we close the show out. But Dan, I want to thank you for just taking the time to do this, and you're a great friend of the show, and we really appreciate you, bud.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. And you guys are doing great work. I mean, you're amplifying stories and aspects of the stories that people really need to hear, and having great guests. And I would say to people, don't lose hope, because you know what? Going back through the 2017 files and forward, there's still new pieces of information coming out that you very obviously the media didn't send anyone down there, and New York Times isn't telling us that Bill Harvey met with Claire Booth Luce in 1963. They don't, and even if they found that, they wouldn't know it's important because they haven't read about the prior stuff. So, but have hope, because we can find this information and we can circulate it. We can hopefully create our own mini groundswell.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point, Dan. And thanks again for coming on. Always enjoy speaking with you. And I think I'll take it as my takeaway, and hopefully some other folks will as well, to what we talked about earlier in terms of, bite-sized, palatable pieces of the assassination and the environment around it that are digestible to the average guy or girl on the street, right? So I think that could go a long way. Having those together and ready to go and to be shared is something that could move the needle, even if slightly, right? More so than another deep dive into, I don't know, ballistics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my final take is I think that instead of like discovering like the red herring out of everything, just to figure out why it happened and like who was behind it. Try to go for that. Like Bart said on a couple episodes ago, focus on one category if you can. If you really want to learn this whole like case, focus on one particular category. It'll give you better understanding of what you're looking for. I want to thank Dan Hanke, of course, my co-host Eli, and just all you guys out there. Please do subscribe to our channel. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. And like I say every episode, the truth is out there. You guys have a good night, and we will see you on the next one. Thank you.